I sold everything I had to fund my daughter's education. When she graduated and landed a high-paying job in New York, I asked if I could stay with her, and she said, "I'm not your retirement plan. You're just a burden." I just smiled and went away. 3 weeks later, she needed me. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Annette Palmer from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. My name is Raymond Holloway, and for most of my life, I believed that love was about sacrifice. I wasn't always a perfect man, but when my wife died in her sleep from an undetected heart condition, I made a vow to our daughter that I'd give her the life her mother never had. Back then, I owned 3 modest rental homes just outside Baltimore. Nothing fancy, peeling paint, creaky floorboards, kitchens that hadn't seen an upgrade since the 80s, but they brought in enough to keep food on the table and a little in savings. I worked maintenance during the day and cleaned offices at night, always with one eye on my girl's future. Her name is Alana. Even as a child, she carried herself like someone who knew where she was going. Sharp, determined, and sometimes a little too grown for her own good. I love that about her. When she got accepted into Columbia University, I swear I cried for 2 days straight. Not because I was sad, but because I couldn't believe I had something to be proud of after all the years of struggle. She was the first Holloway to even step foot on a college campus, let alone one with Ivy League bricks. Her financial aid covered tuition, but the living expenses in New York were brutal. She didn't want to live in student housing, said she needed space, quiet, a better environment to focus. So I sold the properties. Every last one. It wasn't an easy decision. Each house had history, memories. I had built my entire adult life around managing them. But I did it gladly, convinced that I was investing in her future, even if it meant losing mine. The last day, I walked out of my favorite unit, a 2-bedroom bungalow with yellow siding. I lingered in the empty living room for nearly an hour. I sat on the bare floor and let the silence fill me. That house had seen so much. Alana's 3rd birthday party, my wife's final Christmas, the time I nearly electrocuted myself trying to fix the water heater. I let all of it go with one final look. I told myself that this was the right thing. That real love wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go, again and again, even when it tore you apart. Alana flourished. She did internships, joined professional organizations, and made friends whose parents owned companies I could never dream of walking into. She stopped calling me Dad around her college friends. Started saying Ray, like it made me sound more like someone she knew, not someone who raised her. It stung, but I chalked it up to her growing into her world. I didn't want to embarrass her. I figured once she found her footing, she'd come back to me with pride in her eyes, saying something like, "I made it because of you." After graduation, she got a job with a software firm in Manhattan. Her starting salary was nearly triple what I made at my best year. I sent her a handwritten letter, because she never answered her phone anymore, just saying how proud I was. I slipped in a small photo of her mother, a reminder of where she came from. I didn't hear back, not even a thank you. Months went by, and I started having trouble making rent. My savings were nearly gone. The work I was doing, odd handyman jobs, hauling furniture, was drying up. I had chronic back pain, and the cold winters made everything worse. One evening, I sat in my apartment, heating up a can of soup on the stove, and thought, why not ask? Just ask if I could stay with her for a bit, just until I figured things out. I waited until a Saturday afternoon and called her. When she answered, she sounded irritated, like she'd been interrupted from something more important. "Alana, hey," I said gently. "How are you?" "Busy," she replied flatly. "What's up?" I explained my situation, told her I'd fallen on hard times, that I just needed a place to stay for a little while, just a room, even a couch. I offered to help with groceries, clean up, stay out of her way. I remember my hand shaking as I talked. I wasn't just asking for shelter. I was swallowing every ounce of pride I had left. She was silent for a second, then she laughed. Not a warm laugh. A cold, sharp, dismissive one. "You're joking, right?" "Dad," I just got my life together. I'm not looking to turn my place into some retirement home. Alana, I tried to keep my voice steady. I gave up everything for you. I'm not asking for charity, just a little time. Her voice changed, hardened. You chose to do that. I never asked you to sell those properties. You did that on your own. Don't guilt me into cleaning up your mess. I'm not your safety net. You're acting like a parasite. A parasite. I think those words echoed longer than she realized. I sat there, stunned. I didn't even feel angry, just hollow. I felt like someone had pulled the air out of my lungs and left me floating in space. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just said, okay, and hung up. I didn't cry that night. I made another can of soup, cleaned the kitchen, watched an old Western on mute. The silence wasn't comforting, it was suffocating. That night, I packed up the few pictures I had left of her and placed them in a box in the closet. That was the moment I moved on. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally understood. I had loved her far more than she was capable of loving me back. 3 days after that call, I started walking more. Not because I had anywhere to go, but because the silence in my apartment had turned into something unbearable. I'd leave the house at sunrise, hands deep in my pockets, letting the streets guide me wherever they wanted. I'd pass by coffee shops where daughters sat across from their fathers, rolling their eyes affectionately while he droned on about car maintenance or politics. I'd watch from the sidewalk, unseen, uninvited. It was like pressing my face against a window I used to belong behind. I never hated them for it. I just wondered what it felt like to still matter. I replayed that call in my head every single day. Her voice, sharp and bored. The way she made me feel like an inconvenience, like something she needed to scrape off her shoe. I'd known pride before. Hell, I'd spent years feeling proud of her. But this was different. This was shame. Deep, old, childhood kind of shame. The kind you can't scrub off even with time. The kind that makes you question everything you ever did right. Maybe I loved her too hard. Maybe I made her life too easy. Maybe I gave her so much that she never learned to give anything back. One night, my brother Marcus called. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not because of a fight, just life getting in the way. Ray, he said, you all right? I could hear the concern before he even asked what was wrong. I told him the truth. Not everything, but enough. She said I was a parasite, Marcus. Can you believe that? There was silence on the other end. Not because he didn't believe me. Because he did. You gave up everything for that girl, he said finally. Hell, I remember you skipping meals so she could have ballet lessons. She doesn't see it that way. He sighed. You're not the one who's blind, Ray. She is. That talk helped. Not because it fixed anything, but because it reminded me I wasn't insane. I wasn't imagining the cruelty. It really happened. And someone else saw it, too. About a week later, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a framed photo of Alana at her college graduation, the same one I'd sent her months ago. Except this one had been returned. No note. Just the photo, perfectly untouched, sent back like it was something she'd outgrown. I stared at it for a long time. She was smiling in that picture. Big, toothy grin. Honors cord around her neck. My hand had taken that photo. My feet had stood in the pouring rain just to get a clear shot. And now, it sat in my lap like trash that had been mailed back. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I took that frame, walked to the park, and sat by the river. I pulled the picture out, held it for one last look, then tore it in half. Then in quarters. I let the wind take the pieces. Not because I hated her, but because I needed to stop holding on to someone who'd let go of me a long time ago. 2 days later, I saw her. And not by accident. I'd gotten a call from her former high school friend, Tasha. She used to spend entire weekends at our house growing up. Sweet kid, very observant. She's speaking at a Women in Tech event downtown, Tasha told me. Big deal. VIPs. Cameras. Press. Why are you telling me? Because you need to see who she's become. Part of me wanted to hang up. But the other part, the foolish, father part, still clung to a thread of curiosity. I went. I stood in the back of the auditorium, behind a column, half hidden, watching my daughter walk across a stage in a crisp blazer and heels that probably cost more than my rent. She spoke about resilience, independence, and forging your own path. She used phrases like self-made and cutting ties with toxic expectations. She didn't mention me. Not once. When the crowd gave her a standing ovation, I didn't clap. I walked out before the applause ended. Outside, I stood under a lamppost, hands trembling from the cold. That's when I saw her, coming out of the building, flanked by people, laughing and glowing in her spotlight. And then, our eyes met. She froze. Just for a second. Then she turned her head like she hadn't seen me and walked right past. No nod. No smile. No acknowledgement. That was the day she shut the door. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Physically, deliberately, she shut the door of her black town car with me still standing 10 feet away. I heard it latch, clean, final, unbothered. I watched the car pull away and disappear into traffic like I was never there. Something inside me cracked that day. Not anger. Not grief. Something deeper. It was the realization that I was done begging to be seen by someone who had already erased me from their story. And once I felt that, I didn't want her eyes on me anymore. Not in pity. Not in guilt. Not in need. She had slammed the door shut. All I had to do now was walk away from it, and mean it. 3 weeks passed after that night. Each day felt like walking through a house I no longer lived in. Everything familiar, yet hollowed out. I fell into a rhythm of pretending. Pretending I was fine. Pretending it didn't matter that my daughter had looked me dead in the face and chosen indifference. I kept busy, fixed my neighbor's leaky sink, repainted my living room walls a tired shade of beige. Anything to keep my mind from returning to that locked car door. Some nights I'd sit up until dawn, the old armchair creaking beneath me, staring at the doorway like I half expected her to walk through it. But she never did. And in time, that ache started to dull into something more manageable. Not healing, just quiet. Then the phone rang. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. I was watching a rerun of some crime drama, the kind where everyone talks too fast and nothing ever gets solved. When I saw her name flash across my cracked phone screen, Alana Sell, my breath caught. For a moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Let it go to voicemail. I'd earned that right. But another part, that foolish ember of hope I couldn't extinguish, made my thumb swipe across the screen. Hello. Her voice was barely a whisper. Dad, I need you. She sounded different. Stripped. No edge. No control. Just raw panic wrapped in exhaustion. I sat up straighter. Alana? What's going on? I'm in the hospital, she said, voice trembling. I didn't know who else to call. It was like someone reached inside my chest and twisted my heart with both hands. The hospital? Are you okay? What happened? She took a shaky breath. It's my kidneys. They're failing. I was in so much pain, I thought it was food poisoning. But it's serious. Really serious. I was already putting on my coat. Which hospital? St. Luke's. On the east side. Room 14C. I didn't even think. I didn't hesitate. I just moved. 30 minutes later, I was standing in her doorway, staring at the girl I hadn't seen up close in nearly a year. And I barely recognized her. Her skin was pale. Lips dry and cracked. Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, now looked swollen with fear. She looked like a child. My child. And for a terrible moment, I forgot everything. The phone call, the graduation, the car door. I just saw my baby girl sick and alone in a sterile room. Dad, she said, voice cracking. You came. I walked to her side and gently took her hand. It was cold. Clammy. Of course I did, I said softly. I'm here now. She cried then. Real tears. Not crocodile ones. Not performative. Just scared, desperate sobbing. I held her. And damn me, but I cried too. The nurse came in, adjusted some IVs, and gave me a sympathetic nod before leaving us alone again. Later, when the doctor arrived, a serious man with kind eyes, he explained the situation in the clearest, most devastating way possible. Your daughter's kidneys are deteriorating quickly. We're managing her with dialysis for now, but the long-term solution is a transplant. We've started testing family members for compatibility. I nodded slowly, already knowing what he would say next. You're her only living parent. If you're willing, we'd like to test you. Alana looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. She didn't have to say it. It was written all over her face. I agreed to the testing. Not because I'd forgiven her. Not because I owed her. But because, in that moment, it was what a father would do. The following week was a blur of scans, needles, and conversations I didn't fully absorb. My mind wasn't on the procedure. It was on her, on the sudden shift, the sudden warmth. She'd started calling me Dad again, thanking me, asking about my life, smiling in that way kids do when they want something. I tried not to let my guard down. I reminded myself that people in crisis can be kind, but kindness doesn't always mean sincerity. Then came the results. "We have a match," the doctor said. "You're compatible." Alana squeezed my hand, relief flooding her face. But something inside me cracked. Not like before. Not the hurt, ashamed kind. This was different. A part of me hardened, not out of spite, but from clarity. That night, I went home instead of staying in her hospital room. I sat in my kitchen, the lights dim, and replayed every moment since she called. The way she looked at me like a savior. The sudden return of affection. The comfort she seemed to find in my presence. And beneath all of it, I felt it, the need. Not love, not remorse, just need. She needed a kidney, and I happened to have one. I remembered what she'd called me, a parasite. I remembered the way she turned her face away in public, refused to acknowledge me. And now, I was her lifeline. But was I her father again? Or just her donor? The next morning, I returned to the hospital with a decision. She lit up when I walked in, as if hope had walked through the door in my clothes. But when I sat down, I didn't reach for her hand. "I'm not doing the transplant, Alana," I said quietly. She froze. Her smile faded like a switch had been flipped. What do you mean?" "I mean I can't do it. I won't. I'm sorry." Her voice rose. "You're going to let me die?" "I'm going to let you live your truth," I said, voice steady. "You said I was a burden, a parasite. You said I had no place in your life. And I finally believe you." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm finally protecting myself." The silence that followed my refusal was thick enough to choke on. Alana blinked once, then again, like she hadn't heard me right. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. The stillness in that hospital room made the beeping machines feel louder, like each pulse was trying to fill the space I'd emptied with just one sentence. "You can't be serious," she finally whispered, voice trembling more with disbelief than fear. "You're just angry. You're punishing me because of what I said." I didn't flinch. I'd spent the night preparing for this moment, not rehearsing lines, not justifying myself, but settling into the truth that had taken too long to admit. I had nothing left to prove, nothing left to give. "I'm not angry," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was completely true. "I'm tired. There's a difference." She shook her head, eyes welling up, arms crossed tightly over her chest like she could physically hold herself together. "You're my father." I nodded. "I was. But you didn't want a father. Not when I was struggling. Not when I needed a couch to sleep on. Not when I needed to be treated like a human being. You made that very clear." She turned away, as if the window held some kind of escape. "People say things when they're overwhelmed. You blindsided me, Dad. I had just started my life. And I had just ended mine," I said quietly. "You didn't just reject me, Alana. You humiliated me. You talked to me like I was an embarrassment. Like everything I gave up meant nothing." She looked back, and the anger came rushing in now. Color back in her face, eyes sharp again. There was the daughter I remembered, the one who knew how to weaponize words. "So now you're proving a point?" "With my life." "No," I said, calm and unshaken. "I'm drawing a line. For once." She scoffed, pulling her blanket tighter around her. "Everyone's going to hear about this, you know? When I tell them you let your own daughter die." That stung. Not because it was true. It wasn't. But because I knew how much weight those words could carry coming from her lips. She'd always known how to control the narrative, how to twist sympathy out of stone. "I'm not letting you die," I replied. "You're on a transplant list. You've got doctors, insurance. You've got resources I never had. But more importantly, you've got other people who can rally behind you now. That's the life you chose. And I'm not stepping back into it just to be used again." "Used?" Her voice cracked. "You really think I only called you for your kidney?" I met her eyes then, and what she saw in mine must have hurt, because she didn't ask again. "I think," I said slowly, "that if you'd wanted a relationship, you would have built one before you got sick. You would have called on my birthday. You would have answered when I said I was in trouble. You would have shown up. Just once. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't move to comfort her. I had done that too many times before, always the first to apologize, the first to absorb the pain, even when I hadn't caused it. I made a mistake, she whispered. Isn't that what being a parent is about? Forgiveness. No, I said softly. Being a parent is about unconditional love. And I gave you that. But forgiveness? That's earned. That takes time. And right now, I don't see any of that from you. I just see a girl who's afraid and thinks fear entitles her to everything. She sank into the bed like she was made of stone. I stood up, slowly, feeling the weight of this decision settle across my shoulders like an old coat I hadn't worn in years. Heavy, but familiar. Necessary. I loved you more than I loved myself, I said. And maybe that was the problem. She didn't respond. She just turned her face toward the wall, letting the silence fill the space between us one last time. As I walked out of the room, I passed a nurse with kind eyes and a clipboard. You're leaving? She asked gently. I nodded. She has what she needs. I can't give her anything more. The nurse looked like she wanted to say something, but thought better of it. I stepped into the hallway, the door hissing shut behind me. It didn't slam. It didn't echo, but I felt the click of it closing in my bones. The ride home was quiet. The world outside my bus window looked the same. People rushing, kids laughing, buildings looming. But I felt like I'd stepped into another version of myself, one that no longer lived in the shadow of a daughter's approval, one that didn't trade dignity for access, one that finally knew the difference between sacrifice and self-erasure. That night, I got a call from her aunt, my late wife's sister, Patricia. She'd clearly heard about what happened. I just talked to Alana, she said coldly. She told me you abandoned her in the hospital, that you refused to help. I did what I needed to do, I replied, measured and calm. She's your daughter, Raymond. She's also a grown woman. And this isn't about blood anymore. It's about how she treats people, including the ones who broke their backs for her. Patricia exhaled loudly. You're going to regret this. I didn't answer, because I knew I wouldn't. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then, for the first time in months, I slept. Not just rested. Slept. Deep and uninterrupted. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't holding out hope. I wasn't living my life for someone else. Not this time. The next morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls and 7 text messages, all from names I hadn't seen in months, some in years. The messages ranged from subtle guilt trips to outright character assassinations. Patricia had clearly wasted no time painting me as the villain. Her message was the first and most theatrical. I hope you can live with yourself when your daughter dies because of your pride. A cousin I hadn't heard from since the funeral sent a blunt, cold-blooded, Ray. She's your only child. Even Marcus, my own brother, left a voicemail that ended with, you should have been the bigger man. I sat at my kitchen table with the phone on speaker, listening to each one play out while I buttered my toast with shaking hands. The thing no one seemed to ask, not once, was what she had done to lead us here. What she had said, how she had shut me out when I needed her most. They were all so quick to paint me as cruel, but no one remembered that I'd sold my entire life to give her hers. No one remembered the years I went without so she wouldn't have to. I was supposed to sacrifice. That was my role. That was the only version of me they recognized. The giver, the mule, the man who swallowed pain without ever spitting it back. The moment I said no, I became unrecognizable to them. I walked to the local corner store that afternoon, just to clear my head. On the way there, I noticed a few people watching me, 2 old church friends who had known Alana since she was in middle school. One of them, Mrs. Florence, stopped me outside. Raymond Holloway, she said with pursed lips and that same judgmental squint she'd always given the kids who talked during sermons. We've been praying for your daughter. She said you won't help her. I nodded slowly. That's true. Her eyes widened, as if she expected me to deny it. But I'm praying too, I added, that she finds grace and gratitude before it's too late. Mrs. Florence huffed and walked off. Her friend stayed behind a moment longer, eyes soft. She hurt you bad, huh? I nodded. I hope you find peace in your decision, she said gently, even if the rest of them don't understand it. That was the first ounce of kindness I'd felt since walking out of that hospital room. Later that evening, Someone posted about me online. A cryptic Facebook status that didn't name names but was obvious enough. Some parents will let you rot just to prove a point. Blood don't mean love. The post had 100 likes in an hour. One comment even said, "Hope the old man gets kidney stones. See how it feels." I didn't respond. I didn't even log in. I only found out because a friend of mine, Wayne, an old tenant from one of my properties, texted me the screenshot. "Ray," he said, "I don't know what's going on with your daughter, but you were always good to me and my wife. You gave us a place to stay when nobody else would. You let us pay late when our son got sick. That's the man I know." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I called him. "Thanks, Wayne," I said, voice cracking more than I liked. "You have no idea how much that means." "People got short memories, man," he said. "But I remember. You helped people who never gave it back. Don't let anyone make you feel like the bad guy now." That call saved me more than I'll ever admit. But the fallout wasn't just emotional. It was practical. One of my part-time clients, a woman I'd fixed windows for every spring, canceled our standing appointment. Said she was going in a different direction. I knew what that meant. Her niece was friends with Alana. Word spreads. The gossip doesn't need to be accurate. It just needs to be loud. I started staying inside more. Not hiding. Just choosing peace over confrontation. My apartment, once a quiet place of mourning, started to feel like a sanctuary again. I cooked more, walked less, sat on the balcony and read books I'd bought years ago but never opened. I even started writing a little, journaling, I guess. Nothing fancy, just thoughts, things I needed to say but didn't have the audience for anymore. Then one day, while sweeping the sidewalk in front of my building, I saw her. Not Alana, Patricia. She was standing next to a sleek silver car, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. I froze mid-sweep. "You've got 5 minutes," she said. I set the broom aside and walked over, slow and steady. "She's getting worse," Patricia said. "They moved her up the transplant list, but there's still a chance she won't get one in time. You could end this, Raymond. You could save her." I looked down at my hands, dry, cracked, stained from years of labor. "I already did," I said. She shook her head, disgusted. "This isn't who you are." "It's exactly who I am," I replied. "You just never bothered to ask before now." She didn't say another word, just got in her car and drove away. I went back to sweeping. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. Just one line. Peace doesn't mean you were never hurt. It means you stopped letting that hurt decide who you are. 2 weeks passed with no calls, no letters, no visits. The world moved on like it always does. Cars honking, people rushing to nowhere, city lights flickering just the same. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't checking my phone anymore. I wasn't pausing when I heard a knock at the door. I'd stopped waiting for the apology that would never come. And in that stillness, something strange began to grow where the ache used to be, relief. Not joy, not satisfaction, but the quiet, steady breath of someone no longer trapped under the weight of hope. One morning, I found myself standing in front of an old oak table I'd been meaning to fix for years. It was warped in the middle and splintering at the edges, but it was sturdy enough. I spent hours sanding the legs, replacing bolts, treating the wood with care I hadn't shown anything in a long time. It wasn't just a project. It was a metaphor. That table, like me, had seen better days. But it was still here, still standing, still useful, even if no one else saw it. Then, on the 3rd Sunday of that month, a letter arrived. Not a call, not a voicemail, a letter. Handwritten, no return address, but the looping R in my name gave her away immediately. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it with the calm of someone who already knew what it would say. She didn't apologize. Not once. The letter was full of sadness, yes. Fear, definitely, but not remorse. She said she was scared, that the wait list was long, that the dialysis made her too tired to think. She missed work. Her friends were busy, and her apartment felt too big now. She said she wished things had gone differently between us. That's all. Wished. Like it was the weather. Like it wasn't something she had shaped with her own hands. She ended the letter with one sentence I'll never forget. "If you change your mind, I'll be here." I folded the letter once, then again, and placed it in the drawer where I kept old bills and appliance manuals. I didn't throw it away. Not because it meant something, but because it didn't. That was the difference. I didn't need to destroy it to let it go. I spent the afternoon planting small herbs on the fire escape. Basil, thyme, a little mint. Just something to care for. Something that wouldn't ask too much of me. Something that might give back in small ways. That evening, Marcus stopped by. He brought fried chicken and cornbread, and didn't mention Alana until after we'd both finished eating. She sent me a message, he said, wiping his mouth. Said she wrote to you. Said you didn't answer. I nodded. I read it. And, I'm done, I said simply. Not with her, but with begging. With hoping she'll become someone else. Marcus leaned back in his chair, watching me for a long time. You sure? I'm sure. He nodded, then looked out the window. You know, you were always the stronger one. I scoffed. Didn't feel like it. No, he said. But you were. You broke your own back for her. Gave up everything. And when it all went sideways, you didn't sink to her level. You just walked away. I didn't want to, I said. I wanted to scream. Curse. Break things. But I knew none of it would change her. Still, he said, you stood tall. That counts for something. We talked about sports after that. And weather. And nothing. But it was the best conversation I'd had in months. The next day, I got an unexpected knock at the door. It was Tasha, Alana's childhood friend. I hadn't seen her since her early 20s, but she still had the same clear, thoughtful eyes. I'm not here to change your mind, she said quickly. I just thought you should know she's scared. But she's also starting to see what she lost. I didn't respond. I'm not saying she's changed, Tasha added. But I think part of her wishes she could undo things. Wishing doesn't rewind time, I said. It doesn't restore dignity. She nodded. No, it doesn't. But sometimes it starts something. I closed the door gently after she left. And I stood there, hand on the doorknob, letting those words settle. Sometimes it starts something. Maybe. But that wasn't my job anymore. I had carried the guilt, the sacrifice, the silence. I had bled for a child who saw me as disposable. Now, if there was going to be healing, it wouldn't be born from my pain. It would have to rise from hers. That night, I took a photo out of an old album. One of Alana as a toddler, sitting on my shoulders at a county fair, ice cream smeared across her face. I didn't cry. I smiled. She had been my joy once. And for that, I would always hold a quiet gratitude. But I no longer owed her more than that. This was peace. Not loud. Not vengeful. Not victorious. Just peace. What would you do if your own child came back? Not to apologize, but to ask for more. Could you draw the line after a lifetime of sacrifice? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about when love turns into survival. And if this story hit home, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real, raw stories about the complicated bonds of family. Your support helps us keep telling the truths that often go unspoken. See you soon in the next story.